Okay, I'd like to introduce Jym. Well, I won't introduce Jym because I'm going to let Jym introduce himself and a bit about his career, what he's doing for this podcast session. So, Jym, please introduce yourself.
Well, morning everyone, and first of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate letting me come on. I'm Jym Brown. I'm a lecturer by trade, and I actually kind of started off that journey in the world of sport and exercise sciences, and latterly kind of more down the educational route, educational psychology, those sorts of things. But actually, kind of started off my career journey in financial services. I was a headhunter many years ago now. It feels that way, at least, anyway. So I've had kind of a bit of a mixed background where I eventually gravitated towards needing to do something I was kind of passionate about, and I wasn't necessarily passionate about moving corporate bankers around for a fee. So that's kind of, I found my way into teaching, and I've been lecturing in HE and FE, so degree education and college education for the last 10 years or so now, which has led me to here and starting a new journey for myself as an author and speaker.
All right. Okay, so that's quite two really different, career change. That's a
Yeah.
big change. So first of all, though, so how did you end up in the recruitment on the finance side?
Yeah. It was so I did my degree in the things that I've eventually ended up teaching later on. I think I fell into the trap of, and this might be the same for many of the young people out there as well. You kind of fall into that trap of, right, I finished my degree now, I need to start making a living straight away, and you have all these grandiose ideas about the sort of house you want to buy and the sort of lifestyle that you want to lead. So I just said, right, money. That's all I was focused on when I left university. And I think my brain was a little fried from all of the studying. And so, yeah, I just thought, well, okay, what can I do? Where can I go? And I guess I kind of fell into it a little bit. I fell into recruitment. And then from there, I'd always had a bit of a passion for finance in some way, shape or form. And I had an opportunity to move into a business that specialised just in that. And then it seemed like it was a marriage made in heaven at the time.
All right, okay. So how long did you stay within that sector?
I was about 5-6 years, something like that,
okay.
give or take. Actually, a good friend of mine was the owner of the business. Well, he's a good friend of mine now anyway. Charles Walker at Focus Search and Selection. Whether or not he'll hear this, I'm not too sure. But
we'll tag him in.
Well, yeah. Fantastic mentor of mine, and made a massive difference to my life, which I have to say probably is what led me away from his business. If that makes sense, as in he helped me to kind of see things in different ways and follow my passions a little bit more, which ended up meaning moving away from his discipline and from his business, but for all the right reasons.
Okay, so expand a little bit more about that then, as to what he'd actually done with you and got your thought change, your thoughts changing into the direction you wanted to go.
I think, it's a good question, and I might have kind of conflated two things here, so I might need to unpack that a little bit. He was such a fantastic mentor when it comes to developing a skill set to essentially help you to come out of yourself. So I think that perhaps that's what I mean in terms of he sort of developed or lit a fire underneath me in avenues that I hadn't really explored before. So some kind of the softer communicative skills. And he was fantastic like that. He's the sort of guy that he goes into a room and within 2 minutes he's worked the room, in inverted commas. He knows everyone's name and their kids' names and what they do for a living and what their deepest, darkest secrets are. And, within a couple of minutes. And so he kind of taught me those things. And at the same time, I think I was battling with this idea of, and bear in mind, this is at the 2008 recession. So it's like trying to sell chocolate fire guards for 2-3 years. It was not the easiest of ventures. So I guess I was just having this sort of internal battle with myself as to, what do I really want to do? Where do I really want to go? He's opened this side of me that I hadn't really experienced before as well. How can I put that into into good use at the same time, but also focus on things that I'm deeply passionate about. And then that sort of led me towards the direction that I've gone since then.
Oh, so quite in yeah, layman's terms, that you really did sort of like got you thinking about yourself.
Yes,
Around
yeah,
what
yeah.
you wanted. So a sort of like a self awareness and of what you wanted at a personally point of view, or you
Yeah,
putting the two pieces together to get to that.
yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't always. We're not talking completely professionally here as well. It was from a personal social perspective. Trying to think about what language I can use on a podcast.
No, you're all right. No, yeah, fine. I
Okay,
swear, so it's fine.
well, no, but even let's say romantic relationships and things like that, he was such a fantastic guide, and he helped me see the wood for the trees, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was such a great guide, and I guess I have a lot to thank him for, even though we ended up parting ways professionally. I mean, he's ended up being he's a lifelong friend, and I speak to him very regularly. And in actual fact, he had some input into. He was a bit of a financial sponsor for my book in terms of the creation of the book. So we're still working together on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Yeah, it is amazing how there are these characters that are in your life that do have an impact on it. There's my dad's one of mine, but also I've had a couple that have had an impact from an early age when I was like 22 as an engineer. And one of them being a divisional chief exec in training me, which just didn't feel right,
Right.
but I still talk to them now, and we
Yeah,
still communicate now, and it's great, having those conversations.
I
And
think I met.
in some respects, he's still mentoring me as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I met Charles at 23 years old. So again, kind of similar to what you're saying there in terms of that age. But then as well, we bounce off of each other. So in recent times, I've been helping him with a few things that he's been going through, and in terms of work-based decisions, personal decisions, based upon the last sort of 10 years of research and work that I've been doing, and how I can now kind of give back a little bit more than I could have done 10 years ago. So it's a reciprocal, and any good relationship's reciprocal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very much so. So going back to what did you actually study in? Because I know you hit on it, because you alluded to it, but you didn't say what it was. What did you
Yeah,
actually
so
study?
I studied sport and exercise science for my bachelor's degree. I guess I'd had a pretty torrid time in my teens, so I've had some fairly significant health issues all the way through being a child. So I went to a grammar school, and so I had a good academic platform, so to speak. But because I had so many issues in terms of my health, it heavily impacted my education, and I guess it hindered that significantly. So I kind of got to the end of being 16 years old, and I've had a few kind of significant operations for these health issues and whatnot. And I was kind of at a juncture, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? And ended up going to a college in the end after some further health complications. And at that point, it was just, okay, what am I interested in? And I'd always been a fan of sport and all things sporty, so it seemed to just make sense. So I went and did my degree, fortunate enough to get a first class honours. Normally, whatever I put my attention to, I make sure that I give it 110%. But then I guess I just ran out of steam, which then led me into those other disciplines. But eventually I came back to, okay, what am I passionate about? And at the time it was still sport. Can I teach? Because that's initially what I wanted to do, was do my master's, my PhD straight away, and then go into university lecturing. Didn't have those opportunities available to me straight away, but I was able to get in with a college who were able to give me a part-time role that initially started as part-time, then went to full-time, and it just kind of grew from there. And I had the inroad into working in a HE department as well as FE, which then meant I could lecture on degrees, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Okay. Do you talk around those personal things at all? Expand on them, or do you don't let that public?
Like health issues and
yeah.
Oh no, I don't mind. Yeah, I mean yeah, I suppose it's a good thing to do. Yeah.
Because it sounds as though that those have had an impact on your life, without a shadow of a doubt. Have had a bit impact on your life, but I get the impression it's actually brought it full circle back around as to why you wrote the book as well, or some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I guess, well, to explain the last maybe 10 years or so has been a psychological, a philosophical and psychological journey as much as anything else. So I guess people listening to this now would probably be saying, what's a guy that studied physiology and biomechanics got to do with telling us about how we can live better lives and such? So there is a transition period in there, which is set a good solid decade of reading and research, both academically, anecdotally, whatever else it might be. But yeah, that essentially started because I wanted to, I guess, provide myself with some answers as to help me navigate life, which to me had felt pretty negative up until that point. You know, just hurdle after hurdle, obstacle after obstacle. I've always had poor health. Just seems to be a genetic thing. My father never gets ill, but my mum gets ill all the time, and I seem to get all of the bad genes that came through from the parents just sort of landed in one little Jym Brown sized melting pot. Yeah, a few different illnesses and injuries and things that cause problems. I developed. I've been a lifelong migraine sufferer, which
Yeah.
might not seem like it's a big thing, but I've been having them since I was about 3 years old. And in my teens, it got to the point where I was having 2 or 3 a week. Now, for anyone that's listening to this, if they have what are termed classic migraines, so there are about 27 different types of migraines, but classic migraines are pretty significant. You know, that's the huge amounts of vomiting, horrific pain, whatever else. So I was just a zombie all week because I'd have a migraine, recover. So I have a migraine for a day, recover for a day, have a migraine again, recover again. So I was just an emaciated, big black bags under my eyes all the time. My mum used to call me the panda because I just looked, I was white as a sheet with big black marks under my eyes. I then developed a visual disorder associated with the migraines. So have you ever had one, Adam?
No, my daughter has. I'll
Oh,
come
okay.
back to that in a minute, but yeah,
Okay.
but I've never had one.
So some people, when they have a migraine or when they're getting the onset of a migraine, have a visual disturbance called an aura, or technically the terms of phosphorene. And it's like lines, dots, stars, those sorts of things. I've had that permanently in my vision since I was 15.
All right.
One of the very few amount of people on the planet, it seems, to have had what some people term permanent visual aura. So that kind of hit me at sort of 15. So this is just a real crucial time for young people when they're doing or heading into doing their GCSEs and those sorts of things. And then when I was 16, so having just sort of started to sorry about that. I'm ever so sorry. I've got an issue with notifications and stuff. I'm just going to have to try and turn it off now before it causes more problems. We could end up getting the same thing though.
That's all good about being live. That's what we want. Unedited, unscripted. That's absolutely fine. These things happen.
Yeah. That's and there's me thinking I had turned off all notifications, and that meant this thing shouldn't have come through. So
yeah, I've done it. I've done it on my podcast, before.
Okay.
So when I'm the one running it. So yeah.
16. Yes, I thought I'd kind of started to learn how to overcome these issues. I knew it was, well, at that point I didn't know if this is going to stick with me. Turns out yes. I mean, it's 21 years later now, and I still have it, but that's by the by. But then in 2000, just as I'd started my A levels, I was diagnosed with cancer as well. So this was, and fortunately for me, I was very, very lucky in that it was a bit of a misdiagnosis. I had a tumour, had the tumour removed. It had done some damage during the time, which has then caused me a few kind of psychological problems that I've needed to then deal with as I've gone through life. But fortunately for me, it was a case of some complicated operations, but after 3 operations, I was kind of in the clear. So I was fine. But it had taken enough of a toll, both psychologically, but also in terms of the time period, that I had to stop doing my A-levels, and it was a case of, okay, what do I do now? I went and got a job for a period of time, and then went to college and kind of went in a different direction. But that crucial time of me turning 17, going and getting a job, going out into the big bad world, so to speak, at least for a period of time, that was a massive turning point for me. So I almost see my life as 17, the first 17 years I kind of write off, and everything since then, the last 19 years has been the me that I put forward to the world, if you know what I mean.
The true you sort of side.
Yeah. The first 17 years I've just kind of, and maybe I need to change how I look at that. But yeah, essentially I kind of see that as a bit of a write-off, and this is who I am now, as opposed to that first 17 years of just terrible issue after terrible issue. Yeah.
Okay. The cancer side, obviously something nobody ever wants to go through from that side. Do you, how can I say, would you want to change, because you've got the health side, health issues, the psychology side, would you ever want to change anything of those first 17 years? Is there anything that really stands out that that you could have changed? Again, I mean, it's a big assumption, because you've got to be in control of something.
Yes, it's a tough one, because philosophically, you kind of, most of the material out there says, you don't want to live a life of regret, and you don't want to think back to what you would change and how you would change it, because those things make you who you are now. And I completely get all of that. At the same time, having maybe 100 less migraines would have been slightly more palatable. Of course it would have done, and not have had,
absolutely.
Not have had what, I don't know, I think I've had 8 operations in my life. So yeah, would life have been a little nicer and easier with, still learn some of those lessons of how to overcome adversity and whatnot, but with a little less pain? Yeah, sure, that would be great. On the flip side of that, though, yeah, it does make you who you are. I think if I were to eradicate the self-pity element of that equation, and just say that, I guess it was, there were so many things happening in such a tight sequence of events, that it was really hard mentally for me to get out of that. So to get out of that hole, because it felt like everything was always pushed. It was like another thing that pushed me another 6 feet down into that hole. So if I'd have been able to change something, it would be just like you said, about establishing a bit more control and seeing that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and things aren't quite as bad as they might appear to be. And I think I would have had that sort of 15, 16, 17 years old. I think that would have been significantly different if I'd have been able to employ a different mindset. But at the time, I couldn't see that there was no other possibility other than the way I was viewing it at the time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because that, when I look, not experiencing that, not going through that, the strength from a mind point of view, let alone a physical point of view, you must have been immense on it.
Well, I'd say I failed that. I failed.
Okay.
That. I think it's easy to look at it now and say, oh yeah, strength of mind to kind of get through a period of time. And I know that my mum in particular, well, all my family were concerned, significantly concerned at the time. But yeah, I think I failed in that regard. I wasn't robust enough, just because, whether or not that's my fault, I don't know. And I guess you've got to try and take ownership for it. But at the time, it felt like, well, this is the only way I can possibly perceive this situation. And that's where I think I failed, in that I wasn't wise enough. And maybe at 16, I probably wasn't, shouldn't have expected to be. I wasn't wise enough to be able to know that there are other ways of perceiving this situation.
Yeah. So I take it that was a very, very dark time at that particular point.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But then at the same time, it now gives me a little bit more perspective. Well, it gives me loads more perspective on when there are difficult times, and it's like, well, okay, well, 20 years ago, I thought I was going blind, and then got told that I might die. You know, it's like we're talking within 12 months of each other. You know, so when you frame it that way, you then think, oh, it's not so bad. You know, oh, there's a lockdown. We haven't got to leave the house. Well, we can't leave the house for that long. You just, all right.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how things get, rebalanced. Yeah.
So how, as you said there, the rebalance, what was the sort of like the trigger that flipped you out of that and that mindset point of view? And whether necessarily was mindset, I don't know. What was the flip?
Yeah, it was. So when I started that job at 17, and I mean, it almost might seem a little bit silly to be talking about the things that we do at 17 years old and how much of an impact that they have on our lives. But again, for a young person who's gone through a bit of turmoil, these are really, really sensitive years, aren't they? And they have a massive impact on our development. But when I started a job, and it was a little job at a leisure centre near me, and I was a recreation assistant and a kind of trainee fitness instructor and whatnot. But it really brought me out of myself, because I was able to develop. No one knew me there. No one knew me. No one knew anything about me. I could reinvent myself in whatever guise I wanted to. And it was actually, funnily enough, it's when my name changed. So I'm christened James Brown, which, as you can imagine, you go 16, 17 years of all the jokes associated with being called James Brown. When there's an opportunity to deviate away from it, you take it. And so I think that was a kind of a trigger, really. I was able to go, right, James is gone now. Jym's the new guy. Let's create Jym in whatever guise I think is going to be better for my life, and move forward in that way. So I think that was, yeah, it might sound silly, but do you know where I'm coming from? It's like a reinvention, a rebrand,
yeah, because I think it was we're reading Atomic Habits, and I think there was a particular thing in there that, because I'd heard, I think it was Todd Herman, who's I think he was a sports coach, American sports coach. He's quite renowned. He was on about changing of your identity, your personality, to achieve what you wanted to do. Atomic Habits, they were saying that you've got your goal. He drew through 3 circles. You've got your goals, you got the processes, and the process we need to change. We also need to change your identity around how you go about something. So it doesn't sound silly to me at all, because I think in business you've got to, where you want to get to. Something has got to change for you to get there, and yes, that's within the processes, but you've got to change something within yourself to get there as well. So I think it is it makes complete sense to me from that side. But obviously you've got this side around the turmoil and the frustration and wanting to change. So I don't know whether that is any different. I don't know.
I think, well, like in James Clear's, in that Atomic Habits book, when he talks about identity, he's talking about identify with what you want to be, and then that will help you to direct your behavior accordingly, isn't he? So you're saying, if you want to be healthier, if you say, no, I identify with being a healthy person, and then when you go to eat McDonald's, you say, well, would a healthy person eat this? And so he kind of does it that way around, which I think is really, it's great, because it's very actionable for people to use. But yeah, it does start with the individual. And I guess that would be, I didn't necessarily understand these elements at 17. So it wasn't until I kind of started my psychological and philosophical journey of education that I was then able to start to, really understand these concepts that I might have been experimenting with for a little while, but didn't quite fully understand their valence, so to speak.
Yeah. So that financial wrong, the mentor, the looking internally, then took you off in the direction of this philosophical, psychological
Yeah.
style into the lecturing and that side. So tell me a bit about that. I mean, you've made that step change. How long were you doing that side for?
So, well, I'm still a lecturer now.
You're still a lecturer, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm only on a 0.5 contract now. So half my time, and then half my time is to my new ventures, writing, speaking, those sorts of things. Yeah, I think it's 9.5 years, something like that. So best part of a decade. I'd always loved the idea of teaching, because I loved, in the instances when I had the opportunity to, getting someone from A to B. I still get a massive kick out of that, you know, helping someone to develop something, their knowledge or a skill set that they didn't possess before, and you've been the catalyst for that transition. I still get a buzz out of that, and I think that any educator, manager, mentor, whatever, one will know what I'm talking about, that buzz that you get. But two, I think as soon as you stop getting a buzz from that, that's when you have to stop being a teacher or a mentor or a manager, whatever it is. I think if you can't continue once that love is gone, and that is still there for me, definitely. But I guess some of my other aspirations have now kind of overtaken. I feel like 10 years of helping young people to develop themselves and such, I feel like I've put my shift in, if you know what I mean. So now I start to focus on others. Sorry, I've got to go back to the original question now. I've lost the train of thought there a little bit.
No, that's fine.
That's fine. So how it came about, yeah?
Yeah, so you've made that switch, done that internal thinking from your mentor in that side. You've transitioned into the lecturing side, which then comes around to the book. You've answered that perfectly. Which then comes around to the book. What was the trigger to turn around and say, I'm going to go write a book?
Yeah, so that last kind of 10 years has been partly in terms of the academia that I teach, because I was the guy, ended up being the guy that specialised in coaching, development, those sorts of things. I launched an academy as well that I was then kind of the main coach for. So I was developing myself in terms of coaching philosophy and psychological development in terms of how to directly improve people's performances and lives, whatever else it might be. But in order to do that as well as I possibly could, there was a lot of reading around the subject that I was then doing. And it's that development that then led me to this place of wanting to write a book, because I would be reading philosophy from the last 3,000 years, for example, and psychology from the last 20, 30 years of academic research. And I'd see these crossovers, these similarities, where not only within philosophy, well, Confucius said that 2,500 years ago, and Friedrich Nietzsche said that 200 years ago. Oh, look, they're saying the same thing. And then I was seeing the same with the psychological literature. So it just seemed pretty straightforward to me that I've wanted to write, and that's something I want to do and get into. Here are these connections that it seems, without trying to, I don't want to sound arrogant here or anything, but it appeared to me that no one else was writing about these similarities. Well, there you go. It seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned to me, and I think I've read it because I read in your book. You've named Homer Simpson, I think it was, or something in there. It's some links between that. So
yeah, I use Homer as an anti. So what I've done, for anyone obviously hasn't seen it, I try to use movie, TV, song, or other kind of fictional literary references in there to try to show that the scary, deep, detailed philosophical wisdom of the last 3,000 years isn't quite as intimidating as it can be. So if you put it next to something from Finding Nemo or from Big Trouble in Little China and all these various other references that I've got in there, people can then say, oh, okay, I see they're saying. The same thing. One's got slightly more dramatic language, but ultimately they're saying the same thing. Where Homer Simpson comes in, he's my anti-hero for the book. So he's kind of the opposite of whatever the real wisdom is that
Yeah.
trying to do. And it's sometimes it's not until it gets put in the ridiculous opposite that you sometimes go, oh, okay, yeah, now I know what he's talking about. Yeah, so that's what Homer does for me.
Yeah. Now, we haven't mentioned the title of your book, but your title of your book is #Life, The Wisdom of Philosophy, Psychology and Pop Culture for Living a Better Life. You know, and when did you... I'm looking here because I've got it up on Amazon because I'm looking here because I want to remember that title, but it says 27th of July 2020. Cracking cover. I said that to you previously. You know, it's a fantastic cover. When did you complete the book? When did you start it and when did you complete it?
So I started it on the 1st of January 2019. So it was I'd made that decision and I'd already started doing some cursory research, and the concept was already in my head. So on the 1st of January, not one of those kind of New Year's resolutions, I'm going to do something positive, and it just happened to be then, right, let's start doing it. And that's the day that I first kind of put that Word document together to say, this is going to be my book. And then I finished it just before Christmas, which was probably the latter 6 months was kind of hardcore writing. The first 6 months was interspersed between the rest of my work. And yeah, so I finished it just before Christmas, but then it's for a self-published author, it's a minefield when you're a first-time self-published author as well, knowing or navigating that journey between, right, I've finished typing to how do I get a book published. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing from one day to the next. It was just a complete whirlwind of chaos. So yeah, that then ended up taking, well, I suppose until 27th of June. Yeah, July.
How did you go about that? Did you source outside help or?
Yeah, well, I had to take my own advice because obviously the first chapter in the book is about creating order out of chaos. So I had to take my own advice as much as possible, which is never easy to do, and something else that I've written about in there as well. We're often very great at giving other people advice, but not all that great at taking it on board ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had to try to stay relatively calm and just realise that this is normal. Why would I know what to do in this situation? And then just kind of organically grow from research. So leverage off of relationships that I've got. So put some things out on LinkedIn. Who can I talk to? Does anyone know anyone I can talk to about how to navigate this process? Alison Edgar, actually, who I think you might be connected with as well, are you? I'm not too sure.
I can remember the name. I've heard the name, definitely.
Alison's an author and a speaker, and bless her if you end up tagging her in this. She was one of the first people to really, there was no need for her to give me, I think I ended up having about half an hour of her time. And there was no need to give me that time at all. And again, I think it's just testament to who she is as a person, that she didn't get anything out of it, but offered me some advice that steered me in another direction. And it just kind of organically went on from there. I had to make a decision between trying to get a traditional publishing contract or go with a hybrid publisher, which is what Alison had done, or to go down the self-publishing route. Finances meant that I could only really go with the self-publishing route. And then it was a case of hiring an editor, hiring a designer, and then just doing that process back and forth for the next 6, 7, 8 months, which is not an easy process at all. For anyone that is thinking of writing a book, I'm not going to lie to you and say it's a dream come true. No, it's not. It's awful.
What would you say? Because I see whether you want to do this or not, but I'm going to ask you because I just pulled the chapter of the book up, so we're going to go through the chapters. So, what would be your number one piece of advice for anybody thinking of writing a book?
However difficult you think it is, double it.
Okay.
Because and that might sound really negative, but it's deeper than that for me. A big part of psychological well-being is about managing expectations.
Yeah.
So I think that Well, okay, we could split that up a little bit. Writing a book can be a cathartic process regardless, and it could stay on your laptop forever and no one ever sees it, and you could still gain something from that process. So that's kind of one to the side. But getting something published, and not only that, trying to do it to a relatively good standard, and I'm not saying that I've hit that standard, but fingers crossed I have. But getting something that's a relatively polished book that doesn't stand out, as these other people that I spoke to and researched with have said numerous times, you can spot a self-published book a mile off. I didn't want to be in that category. I didn't want to be, oh, that's clearly a self-published book because it's shoddy and it's whatever else. So to get to that is very, very difficult. And I think if you go into it with your eyes wide open, you'll be able to maintain your sanity a lot more than if you think it's going to be simpler than it is. That's what I meant by that comment.
Yeah. So it's not the writing the book and everything like that is
that's the easy bit.
I was just going to say it's the relatively easy bit. It's the actual the back end of the process and actually getting it in now. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. Right. Coming on to your book, if you're open to this. I was gonna. We've got. Bear with me whilst I scroll. We've got part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4.
Yep.
Split down into the chapters.
I might just grab one of my. I've got one copy on my shelf, and I might just grab.
Yeah.
That was one of my big moments, being able to put my own book on my own bookshelf.
I mean, that must be an absolute sense of real achievement. That is.
It was brilliant. I have to say, as much as I started to, not detest is the wrong word, but I was beginning to loathe that latter sort of 7-8 months just because it was so difficult. But yeah, there was a massive sense of relief of being able to when it came through the post, and then being able to slot it in next to some of the authors that I revere. Not saying that it deserves to be next to them, but you know what I mean. Metaphorically, it was a big moment. Yeah,
it's just that tactile feel of having it in your hand it must be fantastic.
Yeah, it was. It was. I didn't feel like I could enjoy it that much at the time, but as it's now progressing, I'm starting to get that sense of fulfillment that I think I was lacking just because of the pressure of trying to get it published.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So part 1, the self. So without going into too much detail, but to try and give the listeners and viewers, because we'll probably put it on YouTube as well, around a little bit about the book. We've got the self, and it's chapter 1 is that order out of chaos, isn't it? So in a world of chaos, create a little order, know thyself, overcome thyself, in the moment, be the driver, not the passenger. How would you, I wouldn't say sum that up, but is obviously this is all to do with your own experiences and that drive. How would you go about billboarding that chapter?
Well,
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good test, and to be honest, the marketing side of this is my weakest area. I would love to say I've got a really snappy, catchy pitch of my book and of all of it that's really well polished, but I'm terrible. I haven't done that at all.
Well, that's good. That's good, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, but we'll come on to that after we've done the end, after this bit. So.
Well, one thing I would say is that this book it's not about me. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that this is like some sort of biography of some guy that they've never met. It's not about me at all. This is purely about everything I've been able to pull together from those different disciplines and what they say about how we can lead better lives. And no personal references made to me and my experiences whatsoever.
I've got this because we had a conversation the other day, and I always look at this, and we were discussing it. In the manufacturing world, we have theory constraints, we have lean manufacturing, we have Six Sigma, and each one of the zealots in that will say their way is best, and and this, that, and the other. Whereas I've always looked at this interconnection between them. So there are bits and bobs of it, and I'll use whatever there is. If there's a tool and technique or something that we can use in one, I'll use that. To get us out of the shit that we're in, or to deal with what we're dealing. And I think you've taken a similar approach, haven't you, in saying we have all these different philosophical, questions or answers and views, and you've sort of like interconnected the dots. And the thing that I took away from the conversation on Friday is where you said the Western world, we were talking about yin and yang, and we were talking about order and chaos, and how the Western is quite order and chaos are sort of like clashing, which is more of the mind and that side, whereas the Eastern look at it from, and I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong on this, and the Eastern side is more of the heart and the soul side, and in balance.
Yeah, and that's the key word there. So in terms of the Taoists, their whole kind of philosophy or religion, so to speak, is about balance. So that's where yin and yang actually comes from, is from Taoism. Whereas Western society tends to be built a little bit more on, even the term debate. If you take the term debate, right, which is what generally happens in business meetings and this, that, and the other, a debate actually implies that there's a winner or a loser. Yeah. That's what the definition of debate would imply that. Whereas a dialectic, for example, is a discussion towards the search for greater knowledge or truth. That's actually more of a traditional Western, so like the ancient Greek kind of Socrates, Plato, those sorts of guys, Aristotle. It's much more about trying to discern the truth through conversation, as opposed to debate, which is my position is correct, and I'm going to, as long as if I can make a superior argument to yours, I'm going to win out, and I've won the debate. Sorry, I've deviated a little bit, but so I guess from my perspective, to go back to your first question, which was about, I guess, the first part of the book, or let's say the book in its entirety, it's about trying to make those connections and not suggest that one is definitively right, like we were talking about on Friday between Kaizen, Six Sigma, all these different things. To not say something's definitively right, but if you can look at the commonalities between all of them, you can say with a fair degree of assuredness or certainty that, probably shouldn't say the term certainty, but with some degree of confidence, you can say, okay, if I kind of steer my boat in those directions, I'm going to be better off than I would have been before, rather than devoutly and resolutely following one doctrine of this is how things need to be done, which is essentially what I've talked about in the third part, knowledge and perspectives, is stopping people from doing that. Don't get so narrow-minded and focused into one way of doing things. Quite Bruce Lee with his be like water analogy. It's about being flexible, and part of being flexible is not viewing everything through the exact same lens all the time.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Because as you know, I've got this on order. I was going to do it on Friday and then got way late, so it's actually in my basket ready to go after this.
No, don't be silly.
No, because it is that how you've summed everything up is that interconnection and not being blinkered and opening out and open out to a world really that you can help in numerous ways. So part one, then the shelf in a world of chaos, and that side, billboard it, go through each one if you can. Go put you on the spot here if you can.
That's a tough one. I guess everything starts with you, which I know it might sound like a massive cliche, but everything starts with the self, because you can put yourself in a very, very different circumstance. There's an old Stoic phrase that, like, wherever you, it's a Stoic phrase or a mindfulness phrase, it's kind of a combination of two. Wherever you are, there you are, kind of thing. It's like, you can change the circumstances, but it's still you that's there. So if you're not happy with you, and if you haven't figured out who you are, you could have £1 million in your bank account tomorrow, but ultimately it's not going to change who you are and your understanding of you. So all of the greatest philosophers have said for 3,000 years, you want to live a better life, first thing you've got to do is figure out yourself. So that's kind of that's why I started with that as the first chapter. But what I did was I used the balance of chaos and order as like an explanatory key. So I use that as my reference point when I'm talking about something and how it affects us as human beings. I use that, I make that as a representation of chaos. And then things that we're comfortable with, things that we know, things that we're happy with, their order. So I use those as kind of an explanatory key all the way through the book.
Okay.
First chapter is all about really understanding yourself, and also not for the purpose of excusing yourself, which is a major thing for me. I think in today's world, there's a lot of this. Everyone needs to accept me for me, and I can be who I want, how I want, and you have to accept me, and this, that, and the other. And I feel like that ends up then superseding what the real messages from these great minds have been, which is no, understand yourself so that you can make yourself better.
Yeah.
There's a difference. Not understanding myself so that I can draw a line and say I don't need to change. It's empowering yourself so that you can change, and that's the key for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree on that. So then going into the part two, as you're working through, so knowledge and perception is the part two side. So you got that, yourself at that side. What about the knowledge and perception?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because this changed a bit as I went through the book, and with a good editor, this sort of thing happens. So my editor, who I'll have to give a little shout out to, Misha Green, self-publishing specialist editor, such a fantastic editor, such a fantastic woman. Highly recommend her services. What I wanted to do was I wanted to show people that, let's say, learning and developing themselves and increasing their knowledge is something that's within everyone's capability. And I tried to show that again from the educational literature and from the philosophical literature. So I started off with the concept of failing and how integral failing is to success. And again, it's another one of these things that, that's a bit of a cliche. Okay, it might be a cliche, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But actually, let's put a bit more meat on the bone here so you can understand from both of those perspectives why it's so valuable and why we have to change the narrative on what it means to fail. So in other words, you actually have to seek out failure, because if you're not engaging with your chaos. And if you're not engaging with your chaos, you're never growing, you're never learning. You have to step outside of your order in order to grow. But in doing so, you are going to fail. But then with each journey that you make and with each little activity that you engage within, you fail that little bit less. Or you, even when it comes to things like managing expectations, you actively engage with the right amount of chaos so that you'll fail just to the right extent, where success is just outside of your grasp. You've got to extend that a little bit more for it. And philosophically, it might sound cheap and trivial. It's not. It really isn't. There's so much more to it than if you dive headfirst into the abyss of chaos and craziness. No one is going to be happy with that. No one is going to thrive when they say, I'll chuck people in at the deep end. From a philosophical and psychological perspective, it is not a good idea. That's where people capitulate. Whereas if you give them just the right amount of chaos, it's invigorating as opposed to paralyzing. So that second chapter is about how you can start to understand the concepts around learning. So I even do a little bit in there about educational psychology, of the different theories that have come through the times, what they mean to us. And then I start to try to challenge narrow-mindedness and perception to get people to broaden their scopes. And I think I mentioned to you on Friday, Alexander Pope had a phrase from 200-300 years ago that all is infected, that the infected spy, as all seems yellow to the jaundiced eye. And that was a really big thing for me. And it's much like I said about when I was younger. We all see life through a lens, but we have to acknowledge that we see life through a lens before we can start to change those lenses. Or in the ideal world, step outside of that and be the person that's looking at everyone else that's seeing it through one particular lens, then that's what I would say is real perspective.
Yeah, I had whether you could say a comparison that side is my daughter has Erlands, and so we started to notice with writing that say the word success. So if the word success and the S, the first S was a capital, we noticed that the capital S was in the word, in the middle of the word, not at the beginning. And we were trying to think, because we knew that she got dyslexia on that side, both literacy and numeracy. So I was thinking there. So I sat with her one morning down in the lounge, one day down in the lounge, and I put the Sky TV guide on. And I thought I'd ask her and said to her, what do you see? But I was asking the questions of, right, what do you see? Is everything normal to you? What does it feel like? And of course, she would answer, yeah, everything's, because she's looking through her eyes. So that is normal for her. So I was asking the wrong questions and then saying, and then started realizing I was asking the wrong questions and saying, well, what is it you're actually seeing? What is happening? And she says that the letters are moving. Yeah. All right. So how do you go? And then she started telling me how she tried to unjuggle the words and everything like that. So, and it was that point there that, so going back a few years, that really sort of like switched some of my thinking around questioning and around the view from other people's eyes.
I like to think of it as being in a boxing match, for example, or any kind of sporting situation. If you're in a boxing match, you are one of the fighters. You're seeing the other fighter through your eyes, and you're dodging punches and you're getting hit by stuff. Do you see as much of the fight as the commentators? Who sees more of the fight? They see more of the fight because they're able to see everything all in one go. You just looking through those two eyes. How many fighters think that they're winning the fight, and 10,000 people in the crowd are sitting there thinking, "No, you're not, mate. Not at all." And that for me, that's the kind of analogy that I like to use is if you're forever the person in the fight, you're not seeing everything. So you have to be able to step away and get that extra perspective so that you can then see what's really going on. And then if you apply that to all of your life, that's essentially what the second part is all about.
Okay, excellent. So then we get into the journey, don't we, from there? Part 3.
Yeah.
Don't give too much away, obviously, but...
Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, this was about... I think everyone's got this... everyone's on a journey, and again, you've got so many cliches that can come out of this, but everyone is on a journey, so to speak, and it ties in with something in the first chapter about being the driver and not the passenger. So developing autonomy, so you steer. Ernest Hemingway had a famous phrase that never confuse movement with action. And the idea that semantic difference there is massively powerful. That action suggests I am actively engaging with something rather than just being pushed along by the current. So the third section there is about how do we create the life that we want for ourselves, and part of that is actually in creativity. So we need to engage with, as human beings, we are creative individuals, and that's what led Homo sapiens to outperform Neanderthals and Homo erectus and other kind of rivals at the time, was that creative storytelling ability and this, that and the other. So it's kind of been built into us. So that third section is about how we can, the importance of, and how we can go about fashioning the life that we want for ourselves. Your ikigai, for example, or the Japanese term for the, I don't know if have you ever seen this, the four concentric, the Venn diagram of four circles, and where they intersect in the middle is your ikigai, which is like your real reason for being, and it's the intersection of what you're good at, what someone will pay you for, what your profession is, and what the world needs, and those together. If you can get to that central bit, that's your ikigai. You've made it, shall we say? But not everyone realizes or is able to obtain that.
There's a question for you. Have you got to yours?
I would say not at this present moment, because I'm not quite there with people willing to pay me for it yet, or I'm not sure if the world needs it. Hopefully, the world needs it, or at least in my metaphorical world. But yeah, monetizing it is now my thing, but it definitely ticks my other boxes. Yeah, it's what I want to do and it's where I want to go, but whether or not I can make that a reality is still yet to be seen.
Yep, good, okay. And then the last chapter is cultivating virtue, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So when you read the Eastern philosophy, this feels like it's something that's lost in modern day culture, for me at least. Even if you type in the word virtue into Google has these analytics that track how often the word is used in various different things on websites, in literature. And the use of the term virtue is just plummeted over the last however many tens of years. I wanted to kind of bring that back. The Eastern philosophy promoted that above all else. If we're more virtuous people, the world gets on a lot better than it would do without it. And we as human beings, we kind of ascend to the pinnacle of who we can be as people. So I wanted to just kind of do that last part to reignite a little bit of that desire to be better people, how we deal with anger and not abusing superiority and all these, some of these, it's benevolence is the term that the Confucians would use, benevolence. But yes, it's trying to bring that back a little bit to say, look, you can actually make yourself more virtuous and more benevolent. You can be a better, nicer person to people. And actually, it's a really good thing, because the knock-on effect psychologically to not just you, but to everyone else is so fantastic. Why would we not want to be better people?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think I actually wrote down a question here prior to coming on, and I was wondering whether to ask it or not. And I was saying, do you think it seemed quite an apt time to say it. I wrote down here, do you think the hate and the trolling is now worse, or has it always been there? It's just that they've got a bigger black platform now.
I actually talk about that in one of the sections, because there's that, it'd be in that last part, the platform, like you say, the bigger platform. There's a few things that kind of go into it. One, yeah, the desire to tear people down has probably always been there, because it's all about hierarchies within society and this, that, and the other, and we all seek to elevate our own status. We've all got a serotonergic based neurotransmitter process in the brain which tracks our status. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to, I can nab a little bit of status there and elevate myself a little bit. So that's kind of always going along. And actually, things like gossip, I can't remember the scientist's name, but has kind of shown that gossip is a fundamentally human thing, and it's actually been really constructive for society, in terms of reining people in and modifying behaviours. So that's really interesting. But the problem with the social media and things like that now is it provides separation, and that separation from the actual act and from the person, not looking them in the eyes whilst you're doing it, actually inflates or like increases the shall we say, the intensity with which people will respond. And not only that, the dopamine hit that they get off the back of it is so significant that it's just exacerbating the problem. So people are much more likely to tear someone down with really inflammatory language when it's online, because they've got that separation. And not only that, they get a dopamine hit from doing it as well.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to do it. So it's this sort of downward spiral, really.
Yeah, no, I sat there last night, and this is what made me think about it. I sat there last night, and I'm in a number of Facebook groups, business Facebook groups, and I was sitting there reading them, and I was just thinking that there was a number of comments. I just thought, why on earth did you make that comment? It was not needed, and it was not. And I actually found myself being wound up by it. I
Yeah.
allowed myself to be wound up by it.
Yeah.
So I actually started saying to myself, "Hang on a minute, they have no benefit on your life, no consequence on your life, or anything like that, and you're allowing this for it to have an effect. Stop." And I stopped changing, the mindset and what I was inputting from an emotional point of view. And that's what made me think about it. It was just, I was thinking, why not? If you can't make a positive comment, shut the up.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that thing of, and there's so many things that are intertwined here. It's like I said about the serotonin-based thing of you want prestige, you want position. It's that debate over dialectic. As in debate, you're looking for someone to win, or you're trying to make sure that your opinion is the one that wins, as opposed to, is this about a search for greater truth and greater knowledge, or is it about winning? All those things all kind of get chucked into the mix.
Yeah.
You go through a LinkedIn post, and sometimes I do it because I'm writing my second book at the moment, which is kind of along these lines. And I look at them just as to find examples of just how crazy the language gets over a fairly innocuous statement that someone might have made, and people will tear other people to pieces. Real ad hominem kind of attacks at people, and you just think, like, one, it's supposed to, let's say LinkedIn is supposed to be a professional networking site. So I think sometimes maybe employers might need to go and have a look at their employees activity online and just see, because essentially they're representing that brand. And two, I'd be really interested to see what their thoughts are on, do you still want to employ someone who speaks this way to, not even just to competitors, but just human beings?
Yeah.
Why would you speak that way to these sorts of things? It's horrific at times.
It is. Brexit. I mean, if there was ever one that was going to divide, that's the one. But I actually seen a tweet from an actor at Boris Johnson that was, "You effing fat, effing this, effing that," and and you just think, that's just not even. That's just so attack and personal. It's just unreal, and from a person that's, it's meant to be a role model, and that side. And I think it is. It's that side where you're tapping away, and there's no like consequence, is there, of that action?
Yeah. Would you have the same conversation if you were sat in front of them? No. I think in most instances it would be fair to say that people wouldn't behave the same way if they were sat in front of them. But also, let's say the third part of the book was about knowledge and perspective. People fall into the trap of their perspective being the correct perspective, being the only one. But also, you get these polarized things like Brexit, polarized societies. What people need to understand is that there are reasons that people fall into certain camps, and it's not necessarily about right and wrong. It's even so personality is measured across the big 5 personality traits. I don't know if you're familiar with those. So like extroversion, openness, neuroticism, these sorts of things, conscientiousness and agreeableness. And people that are, let's say, higher in trait conscientiousness tend to be slightly more right-leaning, like right of centre leaning. They like order, they like things having their own appropriate boxes and being, essentially they like borders between things. If you hear about politically how that can have an impact. Whereas people that are higher in trait openness are naturally a little more left of centre leaning. They're all about openness to new experiences, right? So bearing in mind that these are genetic differences that can be influenced through environment, of course, absolutely, but there is an element of biological background behind this. So to immediately then start chastising people for having essentially what is the difference between how you might organise your cupboards in your kitchen, but kind of what's the word I'm looking for, magnified out to a political perspective, demonising people for either one of those. When you put it that way, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the problem is that with anything that's polarising, and this is where the concept of social identity comes in here, is that you get in-group and out-group affiliation. And as soon as you've established a group, that's it. It's like, are you a football fan, Adam? I can't remember.
No, rugby, not football.
Rugby, okay. Union or league?
Union.
Union, okay, good man. So I'm a Northampton fan because that's where I went to university, in section of Northampton and Leicester, right?
Yeah.
You've got two distinct groups there that hate each other. The thing is that on a political perspective, because of this in-group, out-group affiliation, what always happens is that in-groups see themselves and each other more favourably, and they instantly try to tear down the opposition to elevate their own status and whatever else. The problem is that half the time they might agree with each other.
Yeah.
So in terms of political leans, they agree with each other, let's say on 30-40% of policies, and yet actually, because they're in two distinct groups, oh no, you're out group, so I must hate you. And they demonise, tear each other down, and they forget about what they're actually talking about.
Yeah.
So again, it's something I've written about extensively in my second book. But I think it's not until people start to step back, like the boxing match again, if you're in the fight, you're not seeing the fight. You're experiencing it, you're not seeing it. Whereas what I advocate is you've got to step outside of that and see Brexit for what it really is, which is essentially international economics. It's not about who's right, who's wrong, or whatever.
Well, no, absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely spot on. It's about that. I can say that using all of your, in essence, peripheral vision on everything that you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Widening it because we tend to be so focused.
And how resolute people get with how right they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so again, it's one of the ideas of that the more you think you know, probably the less you do. But it's not until you start to develop yourself in terms of a philosophical journey and psychological journey that you're able to make that separation and be humble enough to think, how much do I know about international economics? How many people are going to answer that question? I know loads about international. Well, why is your opinion on this topic, whatever it might be, so strong? How are you so resolute in that understanding when you've just said you don't really know much about the topic? When you put those sorts of questions to people, that's when they sort of go, oh yeah, maybe I. But then it'll normally be followed up by, but they said this. No. Like you've gone into this again, and
yeah, no, absolutely. Now, when we're on the subject of #life, the book, where can people access it? Obviously, Amazon. I know Amazon because I've got Amazon up here.
Yes, it's only on Amazon. I'm afraid at this point, it was one of those decisions that I had to make as far as how can I manage. Well, I guess it was like the first chapter. How can I manage this world of chaos? So I'll minimise the variables. Just go with one platform. So it's a Kindle version and paperback version on Amazon at this present moment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the versions as well, Kindle and paperback. Yeah. I think it is. I ain't got my glasses on, you see, so I've got the screen. It's £6.86, I think.
They've kindly done an offer for me, which I didn't know about. So it's $7.99 initially. I tried to keep the price as low as possible because, as you can imagine, I'm a new author. No one knows me. So if you've got people sitting on the fence there from a sales perspective, if it's $10.99, $12.99, they probably won't take that chance. So it won't stay at $7.99 or $6.49 or whatever it is right now forever. But get it while it's cheap. Yeah.
5 stars out of 5 stars. So that's the review. So
yeah. Well, Mum did a good job, didn't she?
So now then, you're now into a different aspect, and this is what I was going to allude to because you actually alluded to it. The marketing aspect. You're now in a different aspect now. Is your entrepreneur, business owner, because that's what you are.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that is really sort of like, I don't know whether you could say you wish you had known, or whether you are actually dealing with it now, from coming out of, from being in this world of the business owner, because you mentioned marketing.
Yeah. The biggest, I think it would be an issue, would be my the biggest issue that I face at the moment is I still haven't figured out where my balance is between self-publicizing and being egotistical. I really struggle, and it's one of the things I talk about in the book fairly extensively, is that kind of minimizing extrinsic motivations and not doing things purely for attention's sake. So I'm kind of having this battle and with myself internally all the time about what's valuable for other people, what's actually just trying to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. So I'm constantly psychologically going through this battle myself. So I guess when I write this, I would hope that people would see that I'm dealing with these problems myself as well. This is just what I've found about how you can deal with them. So that's my biggest thing, is I still haven't figured out where my middle ground is between what I'm comfortable doing in terms of that's going to help publicize myself without compromising who I want to be from an extrinsic self. Do you know where I'm?
Yeah. Know what you mean. Yeah,
that's absolutely. My biggest problem at the moment. I'm not a big fan of limelight. I like sharing information and helping people, but I don't want it to be a case of look at me, look at me, look at me. But then I'm totally aware that that's probably not going to sell any books. So it's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
Especially in today's world. Yeah, everything's about personal branding and visibility, and you got to be on TikTok, you got to be on Instagram, you got to be on LinkedIn, you got to be on all these platforms, and I'd probably do 70% better if I took my shirt off and all that. Do you know what I mean? All those. Yeah. I'm battling with those all the time, and I haven't quite figured out where my moral middle ground is.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. There was something here. What do you think? I was going to say, one of the questions here is, what do you think your unique skill is that's helped you become this successful author? Because you will be a successful author.
I was going to say, you might need to change that. You might need to rephrase the successful part there.
And I was going to say, is your unique skill, do you think, changed from the 17-year-old going through? Has your unique skill changed? Because you've gone from that financial side, which you went off through, then went into the teaching side, and that side which you love, now into the author. Do you think that unique skill, there is a unique skill that's just stayed there with you, true to what you are, since you did that internalizing exercise, or do you think it has shifted?
There's probably a couple of things, but I'd say the most dominant would be I have a love of learning. So I think then if you can cultivate a love of learning and bettering yourself, you can, I won't say thrive, because that would be probably a little over the top for where I am right now, but you can survive in multiple different worlds and environments, because you don't see, right, there's a steep learning curve ahead of me, that means I can't do it. You see it as, okay, I've just got a steep learning curve, and I'm going to learn. And I back myself to be able to learn enough to survive in this environment. So yeah. I'd say that would probably be my, if I were to say my strength would be, I always back myself to be able to learn something, whether that's languages, whether that's academia, whatever else it might be. Using the wisdom that I found from educational psychology, I'll always back myself to be able to say, yeah, I'll be able to figure that out.
Yeah, because I think you said earlier on in the podcast that when you do something, you throw yourself fully into it, immerse yourself into it.
Yeah, I try not to be. I try to take my own advice, and I try not to be scared of failing and looking stupid, because I think, I mentioned languages a minute ago there. One of the most significant reasons people think that it's harder to learn languages when you're older, which is not true, by the way. The literature shows that pretty clearly, is because people are scared of looking silly. They're scared of looking stupid. How many people do you know that might go on holiday every year in Spain, or have got a holiday home or something like that, and they can speak barely any more words than they could do before they started. You know, they've been to Spain for the last 10 years and they know how to order dinner or something like that. They're afraid to engage with the unknown. They're afraid to engage with something that's going to make them look vulnerable. And that's what makes the difference. It's got nothing to do with cognitive ability. But I always find it funny. People say to me, but it's much harder to learn languages when you're older. And I'm saying, that's funny considering you're articulating that to me in a language that you've already learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to come on to some general questions, some quick, well, I don't know whether they are quick fire questions. I've asked this one a number of times, actually. It was great. What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
Sorry, could you just repeat the latter part? That's right.
What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
Inspired was definitely the Eastern philosophy was the thing that really did that for me. And when I say inspired, it might be, I might need to put some context around that. It might not be in the way that other people might see it. I grew up idolizing Michael Jordan, for example. I'm a big basketball fan. I had posters of him all around my room. So he inspired me from the feats of greatness and athleticism. But Eastern philosophy inspired me in terms of it helped provide explanation and calm to the storm. And actually that was more significant to me than any Tony Robbins, Marco, any of those kind of more obvious inspiration. It was the deeper rooted philosophy behind living that inspired me more so than anything else.
Fantastic. That's a good answer. Yeah, I'm just out there because I've got loads of questions of Peter's here, and I'm flicking through because that's why my eyes are. And I'm just thinking, I wonder if this one, how has failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? And do you have a favorite failure of yours?
I guess, again, keeping my own words in mind here, I love failure as long as I manage to compartmentalize it appropriately at the time. I love being an underdog. So I think there is kind of like this global mindset of being of failing whilst being an underdog. I love that. I love the idea that people don't think I'll be able to do that. So I love that because I think there's a safety in being an underdog, because you haven't got to immediately perform. You haven't got to immediately be incredible at it, because no one has expectations of you being able to do that. I think on the bad side of that, though, it comes from having a bit of a chip on my shoulder, from having so much adversity when I was young. Well, probably shouldn't even say that. Having a degree of adversity when I was young, I was always behind. I was always behind at school because I was missing so much time. I was always behind, always chasing. So I think there's that inbuilt thing in me. That would probably be it. It would be an awareness of what it means to be an underdog, and how valuable that can be for your life if you don't get married to the idea that you are failing and that you're behind everyone else.
Good, that's shit up. It's good. I like that. Here's another one, because probably in and around as to what we've discussed. In the difficult moments, how do you stay focused on moving forward and making progress?
It's a phrase that I kind of use now, which is, and it comes from that first chapter, that first part about the chaos and order, is focus on the 2 inches of chaos in front of your face. Because I think it's, I liken it to, like, if you try to navigate a dark corridor, if you're trying to look all the way to the back of the corridor, that's scary. Philosophically, that's where the dragon of chaos lives, in the dark cave that you can't see. It's the abyss that Friedrich Nietzsche talks about. Whereas just focusing on taking that one step, two inches in front of where you are right now, that would be what I do. So from a practical perspective, funnily enough, I actually wasn't feeling mentally all that great yesterday. So I tidied a room. That's it. Pick a piece of chaos that you can that you can engage with, and you've got the chance of turning to order, and just see what blossoms from that one tiny little thing that you've done. So that would be my answer for that.
Fantastic. I'll tell you what, because we'll come to end, because I've just looked at the time. We've carried on. We've gone on for quite a while.
Well, that's my
no, that's my fault, because I've found it fascinating talking to you. I think it's been great. Where was it? Oh yeah. No, actually, I'm going to ask two. First one: if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Wow. It would be a quote from Carl Jung, a famous psychologist. I'm probably going to butcher the phrase a little bit, but it would be the thing that will give us the greatest amount of value is found where we least want to look. That would probably be a really underpinning philosophy of life that just keeps us all in check. You know, if you really want to move forward, the things that are going to give you the greatest amount of value are found where you really don't want to look, and you know where they are, you know what they are, but you just don't want to recognize them. But that's what's going to change your life.
That's superb. Next one, last one. We'll finish on this one. If in 150 years science fails to save us, and all that is left is a book about your life, what would the title be, and what would be the blurb, or what would the blurb tell us about Jym Brown?
Wow. What would the title be, and what would the blurb say about? Oh my God. It'd be something along the lines of, here's a guy who tried to figure some stuff out. That'd be about he tried to figure some stuff out, and he may have done a half decent job at it, or a very poor job at it. I don't know, but it would be honest. It would be an honest reflection of someone's attempt to bring a little bit of order to some chaos, and bring a bit of explanation to this puzzle that we live with every day.
Super. So, mention the book. Do you have any? Obviously, you've got your LinkedIn, so you could Jym Brown, which is Jym Brown.
Yes.
Spelled, so people can connect with you on LinkedIn if they want to. I'm assuming.
I actually have a bit of an issue with LinkedIn at the moment. It won't let me send any invitations, which is very strange. I need to get in touch with them. I can accept them, but I can't send them. And I've not done anything untoward in terms of LinkedIn's policy, so I have no idea what that's about. But I need to get in touch with them. But
we'll have a discussion offline.
Oh, okay.
And have you got a website or anything like that? Is there a website about the book or anything?
Yeah, gymbrown.co.uk. So again, spelled Jym Brown as in the colour .co.uk. I'm not the greatest techie, so forgive me that the standard might not be. If some of the links don't quite navigate themselves appropriately, I'm still working on it. Instagram, Jym Brown _ASC is kind of my business one. And then Facebook, I've got a Facebook business page of the same name.
Yeah, and as everybody, what I'll do is I'll ask Jim to send me those links, and I'll put them in the description, so they'll be in the description of the podcast anyway, so you can get access to them that way as well. Been great having you on. Thank you very much.
All right, absolutely. Yeah, it's been really great. Thank you.
And I wish you every success with the book, and every success with the second one. Now, we didn't discuss the second one. And do you want to have you got the title of the second one? Do you want to give the title of the second one away?
Well, someone told me the other day that I really should stop telling people that, because someone else then nabs ideas and this, and intellectual property and whatnot. But it's the second book's called Clever Enough to Be Stupid. So it's talking about a lot of the things that we've spoken about today, in terms of it's the power of knowing that you don't know as much as you think you do. And actually, that's a hell of a lot deeper than just a momentary realization of kind of being humble. It opens doors to learning. It accelerates learning processes. It stops people being so resolute and always battling, and that whole thing of trying to be superior all the time. It actually puts barriers in the way of our learning. So yeah, in a nutshell. And then obviously in the meantime, it's trying to develop some speaking work as well. So that's kind of they're the two prongs I need to develop moving forward.
Excellent. And just give your book a plug for the last one again.
Yeah. So it's are we recording visually as well?
Yes.
We are. Okay. So because if not, this would be really redundant. But so it's Jym Brown #life. The wisdom of philosophy, psychology, and pop culture for leading a better life. Hopefully, an honest reflection of all of the connections between sort of that I've been able to find between psychology and philosophy that can help us to create a better life, or let's say a better version of ourselves than we were yesterday.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jim.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.